Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah. We're going to read through the English translation of this week's Torah portion, which is Mishpatim, found in the book of Exodus, starting with chapter 21. We'll read through that English translation. I'll share with you my reaction to the Torah portion, and then we'll have our collective conversation about it. And if you'd like to go ahead and join in a recitation of blessing, giving thanks for this moment, please feel free to do so.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvot tov v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. Let me share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. These are the rules that you shall set before them. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years. In the 7th year, he shall go free without payment. If he came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she has borne him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free, his master shall take him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his slave for life. Richard, I'm going to invite you to read, and I'm going to turn my computer towards you so you go.
When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not be freed as male slaves are. If she proves to be displeasing to her master, who designed her for herself, designated her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He shall not have the right to sell her to outsiders, since he broke faith with her. And if he designated her for his son, he shall deal with her as is the practice with free maidens. If he marries another, he must not withhold from this one her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he fails her in these 3 ways, she shall go free without payment. He who fatally strikes a man shall be put to death. If he did not do it by design, but it came about by an act of God, I will assign you a place to which he can flee. When a man schemes against another and kills him treacherously, you shall take from my very altar to be put to death.
Thank you, Richard. Uh-oh. Okay. Did I lose it? Did we lose?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Let me invite Margot. Would you like to read where
saying that the whole time while you were he who strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sold him or is still holding him, shall be put to death. He who insults his father or his mother shall be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or fist, and he does not die but has to take to his bed, if he then gets up and walks outdoors upon his staff, the assailant shall go unpunished, except he must pay for his idleness and his cure. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and he dies there and then, he must be avenged. But if if he survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, since he is the other's property. When men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the responsible, according to the woman's husband, may exact from him the payment to be based on reckoning. But if the other damage ensues to be based to be but if the other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, and burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise.
Well, thank you, Margot. And Mark, would you like to continue there? We're at verse 26.
I would, thank you. If a person strikes the eye of his non-Jewish bondman or the eye of his non-Jewish bondwoman and ruins his eyesight, he must free him or her as compensation for the loss of his or her eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his bondman or the tooth of his bondwoman, he must free him or her as compensation for the loss of his or her tooth. If a work bull gores a man or woman and the victim dies, the work bull must be stoned. Its meat may not be eaten, but the owner of the work bull must be acquitted. However, if it was a work bull that had gored on 3 previous occasions, and its owner had been warned in court, but he did not guard it, and it then killed a man or a woman, the work bull must be stoned. Its owner, too, will be put to death. When the atonement fine is imposed on him, he must pay whatever sum is imposed on him by the court as ransom for his life. If the work bull gores and kills a boy or a girl, the owner must be dealt with according to the same law. If the work bull gores a non-Jewish bondsman or bondswoman, the work bull's owner must pay a fixed fine of 30 silver shekels to his or her master, and the work bull must be stoned. If a person removes the cover of a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and a work bull or a donkey falls into it, the one responsible for making the pit must make restitution. He must restore the value of the animal to its owner, and the carcass remains its owner's property. If one man's work bull attacks his fellow's work bull and the attacked work bull dies, the owners must sell the live work bull and divide the proceeds, and they must also divide the value of the carcass. However, if the work bull was known to have gored on 3 previous occasions, yet its owner did not guard it, he must pay the full value of the work bull in compensation for the work bull, and the carcass remains its owner's property. If a person steals a work bull, sheep, or goat and slaughters or sells it, he must repay 5 cattle in place of the work bull and 4 sheep or goats in place of the sheep or goat.
Thank you. Jim, we're at the very start of chapter 22, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. If the thief is seized while tunneling and he is beaten to death, there is no blood guilt in his case. If the sun has risen on him, there is blood guilt in that case. He must make restitution. If he lacks the means, he shall be sold for his theft. But if what he stole, whether ox or ass or sheep, is found alive in his possession, he shall pay double. When a man lets his livestock loose to graze in another's land, and so allows a field or a vineyard to be grazed bare, he must make restitution for the impairment of that field or vineyard. When a fire is started and spreads to thorns so that stacked, standing, or growing grain is consumed, he who started the fire must make restitution. When a man gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall depose before God that he has not laid hands on the other's property. And all charges of misappropriation pertaining to an ox, an ass, a sheep, a garment, or any other loss, whereof one party alleges this is it. The case of both parties shall come before God, he whom God declares guilty, and shall pay double to the other.
Thank you so much, Jim. Dave, would you like to read? We're at verse 9.
When one person gives another a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to guard, and it dies or is injured or is carried off with no witness about, an oath before God shall decide between the two of them that one has not laid hands on the property of the other. The owner must acquire, and no restitution shall be made.
No, it's okay. It's
You're right.
But if the animal was stolen from the guardian, restitution shall be made to its owner. If it was torn by beasts, the guardian shall bring it as evidence, not needing to replace what has been torn by beasts. When one person borrows an animal from another and it dies or is injured, its owner not being with it, restitution must be made. If the owner was with it, no restitution need be made, but if it was hired, that payment is due. If a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid and lies with her, he must make her his wife by payment of a bride price. If her father refuses to give her to him, he must still weigh out the silver in accordance with the bride price for virgins. You shall not tolerate a sorceress. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to a god other than the eternal alone shall be proscribed.
Thank you so much, Dave. Let me invite Robert. We're now at verse 20, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Ye shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If thou afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by the sun goeth down, by that the sun goeth down. For that is his covering only, it is his raiment for his skin, wherein shall he sleep. And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me, that I will hear, for I am gracious. Thou shalt not revile the gods, nor curse the ruler of thy people. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits, or of thy liquors, the firstborn of thy sons thou shalt give unto me. Likewise shalt thou do with thine own oxen, and with thy sheep. 7 days it shall be with his dam. On the 8th day thou shalt give it to me. And ye shall be holy men unto me. Neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. Ye shall cast it. to the dogs.
Thank you, Earl. And David, we're now at the start of chapter 23, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall not bring up a false report. Am I clear?
Yes.
Likewise. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Do not join your hand with a wicked person to be a malevolent witness. You shall not be following many to do bad. And you shall not testify about a dispute to bend, following many to bend it. And you shall not favor a weak person in his dispute. If you will happen upon your enemy's ox or his ass straying, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the ass of someone who hates you sagging under its burden, and you would hold back from helping him, you shall help with him. You shall not bend the judgment of your poor in his dispute. You shall not keep far from a word of a lie. And do not kill an innocent and virtuous person, because I shall not vindicate a wicked person. And you shall not take a bribe, because bribery will blind those who can see and will undermine the words of the virtuous. And you shall not oppress an alien, since you know the alien's soul, because you were aliens in the land of Egypt.
Thank you, David. Rose, we're now at verse 10 of chapter 23, if you'd like to read.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but in the seventh you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. 6 days shall you do your work, but on the seventh day you will cease from labor, in order that your ox and your donkey may rest, and that your homeborn slaves and the stranger may be refreshed. Be on guard concerning all that I have told you. Make no mention of the names of other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you shall hold a festival for me. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I commanded you at the set time of the month of Abib. For in it you went forth from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And the feast of the harvest, the first fruits of your work, of what you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in the results of your work from the field. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the sovereign God. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the fat of my festal offering shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the eternal your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. I'm sending an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have made ready. Pay heed to him and obey him. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him. But if you obey him and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes.
Norm, we're at verse 23 of chapter 23, if you'd like to read.
When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and I annihilate them, you shall not bow down to their gods and worship and follow their practices, but shall tear down and smash their pillars to bits. You shall serve the eternal your God, who will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman in your land shall miscarry or be fertile. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. I will send forth my terror before you, and I will throw into panic all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn tail before you. I will send a plague ahead of you, and you shall drive before you the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. I will not drive them before you in a single year, but the land shall become desolate, and wild beasts multiply to your hurt. I will drive them out before you little by little, until you have increased and possessed the land. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land unto your hands, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For you will serve their God, and it will prove a snare to you.
Thank you, Lord. Linda and Justin, we're at the start of chapter 24, if you'd like to read.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. And to Moses he said, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and prostrate yourselves from afar. And Moses alone shall approach the Lord, but they shall not approach, and the people shall not ascend with him." So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. And all the people answered in unison and said, "All the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 monuments for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent the youths of the children of Israel, and they offered up burnt offerings, and they slaughtered peace offerings to the Lord, bulls. And Moses took half the blood and put it into the basins, and half the blood he cast onto the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read it within the hearing of the people, and they said, "All that the Lord spoke, we will do and we will hear." And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people. And he said, "Behold the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has formed with you concerning these words."
And Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel ascended. And they perceived the God of Israel, and beneath his feet was like the forming of a sapphire brick, and like the appearance of the heavens for clarity. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he did not lay his hand, and they perceived God, and they ate and drank. And the Lord said to Moses, "Come to me to the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the stone tablets, the law and the commandments, which I have written to instruct them." So Moses and Joshua, his servant, arose, and Moses ascended to the mount of God. And to the elders he said, "Wait for us here until we return to you. And here Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a case, let him go to them." And Moses went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it for 6 days. He called to Moses on the 7th day from within the cloud. And the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire atop the mountain before the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses came within the cloud, And he went up to the mountain, and Moses was upon the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for this week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of what I experienced this year in reading this portion. And just to put it in context, our portion this week, Mishpatim, comes immediately after Parshat Yitro, which has this dramatic moment that is at the foot of Mount Sinai, where God appears to all of Israel, and there is given what is commonly known as the Ten Commandments. And then we have this week's portion, which begins with a whole list of very detailed rules and laws that are to be followed. So in a lot of sense, it really makes a logical order that this week's portion, with page after page of detailed laws, procedures, and protocols that are to be followed, comes after this dramatic moment at Mount Sinai where the Ten Commandments are given. From very few numbers of broad subjects, we then get down to the details of what life is supposed to be like. And so we have here a number one on the study sheet. I have this verse that we've just read in this concluding chapter, chapter 24. Moses took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people, and they all said, all that God has said we will do and will hear. Then God said, come up to me on the mountain. So that makes it certainly seem as if there is this dramatic moment at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments are given, and then more specificity, everything having to do with how to deal with loans, how to deal with damages, what to do about lost property, and how to deal with indentured servants or slaves, and how to observe the sabbatical year and the different holidays. But our medieval commentator, Rashi, says something quite interesting about this chapter 24, the last chapter that we just read. He says, this passage, that is the first 12 verses of chapter 24, was said before the 10 commandments, or in Hebrew, the 10 utterances would be translated. So Rashi is now saying this portion of what we just read, the 12 first verses of chapter 24, is in a sense chronologically out of order in the Torah. That what it's describing is something that happened before the moment of the giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. If that's the case, what was it that inspired the people to say, everything that God has said, we'll do? What is it saying that they were responding to at all? Well, Rashi's comment, which gets fleshed out by Midrash, is offering us, in a sense, a different way of understanding what it is that possibly inspires people to want to create a different and better world. If one were to read the material in the chronological order in which it appears, it would seem as if what inspires people is to know exactly the details and the rules and the structure that they are embracing and acceding to. But Rashi's comment and the Midrash is suggesting that there's something that happens before you get all the details, all the rules, all the structures that are to be part of this new society. And so what is it? Well, the Midrash points to the verse that says that Moses read to them a book of the covenant. Well, what is this book of the covenant? And so the Midrash imagines that what Moses does before that moment at Mount Sinai is to read them the entire story of everything that has happened so far, from the moment of creation all the way up to that moment where they leave Egypt. And the people hear that, and they get re-inspired by that noble and sacred journey. And that also they seem to realize that what we've done so far has not been enough. And they seek to do more in order to fulfill this grand mission that's been given to humanity in general and to Abraham and his descendants in particular. So here is the way a 19th century Hasidic rabbi looks at this material, and this is number 2 on the study sheet. How can the moment of arrival in the wilderness, a moment before Torah was given, serve as a paradigm of the eternal freshness of the words of Torah? That is, we will do and we will hear, we'll hear more. Before the process of revelation begins, there is a spontaneous understanding that their relation to law has been inadequate. There is a resolve to imbue old forms with new meanings as the expression of God's law. They realize they have done nothing, for all was habit and convention. Look, here is a different way of understanding what it is that would inspire people to want to fulfill and execute on this vision of a new world. And that is a desire that they have within them to not only embrace specific new rules, but in a sense to transform themselves. There's a yearning that they have. And it's that yearning, that readiness to be transformed as people capable of reimagining and turning old forms and imbuing them with new meaning, that in a sense is what precipitates the moment at Mount Sinai. That is what causes the barrier between, if you will, heaven and earth, between the infinite dimension and the finite dimension, to crack open, and for that divine, that bit of divine insight and wisdom to kind of pour through that portal into this finite world and into these finite beings. Here's the way Aviva Zornberg describes it in her book, The Particulars of Rapture. The new era dawns, therefore, before the Torah is given. The Torah comes to answer a human readiness for a revisioning of culture. God as transformative presence comes commanding from the outside, but the desire for him comes from within human consciousness. This notion that Rashi has introduced to us, and which is fleshed out both by Midrash and the Hasidic understandings of this spark of divine wisdom and guidance and presence being driven by a yearning and a desire and a readiness for people to reform themselves, and is a way of taking this material and placing it outside the chronological order of things that we've been reading. So it evokes for me a phrase that one encounters in the Talmud. And in the Talmud, it reads this way, and then I'll translate it for you. Ein mukdam umachar haTorah, ba'Torah. There is no early or late in Torah. And that's understood to mean, what the rabbis are trying to say is that the Torah is not strictly a chronological work. It is, in fact, a chronological. It's an approach that where Torah exists beyond the limitations of time. And if we remember months ago when we just looked at how this entire body of wisdom opened up with Bereshit, Bara, Elohim, the opening lines of Genesis, we talked about how Bereshit, which in many translations is rendered as in the beginning, we looked at that phrase in Hebrew and realized Bereshit is really no beginning at all. In a sense, it's an artificial point of a journey something which is preceded by a journey and which is followed by a journey. It's just an arbitrary point along the way. That there are other beginnings before the beginning that we read about in the book. And so the notion of the fluidity of time, if you will, is already captured with the very first few words that we read in Torah. It got me to thinking about art and the major transition that happens between classical art and modern art. So classical art was focused on what I'll call the perfected moment. That is, to visually convey a sense of permanence, to convey a sense that this moment is perfect. This moment has to be viewed in its unchanged and unchanging quality. And it comes from a desire to be able to express an absolute truth. And then the major break from hundreds of years of classical art comes primarily with that movement that becomes known as the Impressionist movement, who instead of focusing on the perfected moment, they focus on the instantaneous moment. That is a recognition that everything is in flux, everything is constantly moving. And it's a divergence from that pursuit of a perfect moment, an absolute truth, and towards that which is fleeting and relative and subjective. And that is the pathway that modern art and literature and music has been exploring and pursuing and playing with for these last 200 years. So I want to introduce the artist that I came across that I thought would be interesting for this week, and that's this woman, Tracy Everly. And if you look at the painting that's on the front of the study sheet, it's a painting that she did, and there's a woman sitting in a chair, and there's a child that's sitting on her lap. And if one were a classical artist, one would look at this and say, well, that's not a finished work at all. It is much too lacking in detail. It's much too imprecise. It's not pure enough in its clarity. And yet, as a modern artist would say, well, but that's the way life is. Life is full of these fleeting moments where things are never completely finished, never completely perfect. And that lack of perfection, that sense of the fleetingness, doesn't deprive them these moments of beauty and profundity and preciousness. In fact, it probably is what makes us aware of how beautiful and true and real and beautiful these moments are. So here's what our artist Tracy Everly says about her own work, number 4 on our study sheet. When I paint, I begin without beginning. Another way to say it is to begin without knowing. And this approach is opposite of the advice to begin with the end in mind, or to know where you're going before you start. Shoshin is a word from Zen Buddhism meaning beginner's mind. It means having an attitude, openness, eagerness, lack of preconception. Paint what you see, not what you think you know. This readiness to surrender oneself to the work rather than trying to control it. This sense of not leading the story, but letting the story lead you. The notion of letting the line or the dot that you put on the canvas tell you where the next line or dot should be, rather than you deciding where it should be. These are all elements that one discovers within a modern literature, art, and music. So here's what Robert Frost said that's somewhat similar. I have never started a poem yet whose end I knew. Writing a poem is discovery. And here's from E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings, who upended, if you will, the world of poetry by his exploration, not just with words themselves, but with the very topography of how they appeared on a page, and syntax, and his vocabulary. And so when he placed words on a page, the page was not just there to functionally hold these from just falling into thin air. The page became a kind of canvas where he structured these things so that their way they appeared was also conveying a message, as well as the words, the symbols themselves. And here's what E.E. Cummings said. The artist is no other than he who unknows what he has learned in order to know himself. This notion about unknowing oneself, this notion about being open to a way rather than trying to control the way and knowing all the details of the way and having a perfect way. I think this is in part what Rashi is hinting at about a different way of thinking, how people are ready to embrace a new path. And it's not because they're given the final product and they vote aye. It's because people want to reconstruct themselves, not just the world around them. So to tie this together with another theme that I saw in this week's portion, what struck me is this, is that what we call the 10 Commandments, which in Jewish tradition is also known as Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances. If you remember, the final one of those 10 is, you will not covet. And then I noticed this week, the final of the items that's recited in Mishpatim, of all the lists, that page after page of all the things that are to be done, the concluding one is this: you'll make no covenant with them and their gods. They will not remain in your land. Lest turning to face them, they cause you to sin against me, because you would serve their gods, and it would be to you a snare. So the last reading of this list in Mishpatim is also about not coveting, and also about not engaging in idolatry. And to me, what I saw there was this. In the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, if you follow this way, you won't want what someone else has. You will feel fulfilled. You will feel at peace. You won't feel grievant. And you will not feel the desire to control in order to take what someone else has. And that's what I get in this last section in Mishpatim as well. That if you follow all these rules and ways and protocols and rites and rituals that I'm passing along to you, it'll make you the kind of person that won't want to covet and that won't want to engage in idolatry. Because ultimately, idolatry is born out of fear, and it's born out of a sense of the desire for control. And that sense of control ultimately is based upon the elevation of self-love over love for others. And so this body of wisdom is now presenting to us this notion that what all this ultimately about is to is a reconstruction of the self from a fearing, ego-driven self to one that is full of attachment, attunement, love, compassion, and sharing. So with that, I'd love to know what you experienced as we went our way through this Parshat Mishpatim. You raise your hands, I'd love to call upon you. Let me turn the computer here towards Richard and let him share.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. I just, I'll notice that there are all kinds of little things, so many different pieces to look at in an act. Like, it wasn't, this is not a fundamentalist list of absolutes. This is the list that says, above all, is ethics. And that's what Judaism has to offer. And when you get the whole Talmud afterwards, does all that constantly, and we're doing that now. Well, what's the situation? Talk to someone today, it's all about law and order. It's bad, people are terrible. I said, well, what are you doing? Break it down into where the fairness is, and then bring that fairness into your own attitude about how you work in the world. It's not about having punishment lead you to do the right thing. It has to do with understanding the pleasantry of, didn't mean to say that the need for peace in the community and in the consciousness of all of us in order to behave well with one another. There are no rules per se.
Right. Thank you. And go ahead, Rose, you've got your hand up, please.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Well, there are kind of two things. One thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, alluding to kind of what you were saying in a way, like we shall do and we shall listen, and, being in the desert. It's very much like almost a wedding or commitment ceremony. And being in the desert is like going to the mikveh. Instead of water, you have sand or something, but it's a purification thing. And so I think B'nai Yisrael are saying we are committing to this relationship. And, in the broad strokes of it, it's like, in marriage, you first have to make the commitment. It's that I want to make this work. And then come the details like taking out the garbage and, lifting the toilet seat, whatever, and those become, what's happening then. But I think this parsha also, when you're looking at this, you're, in my mind, I was seeing, the Code of Hammurabi or some of the other codes which had preceded this by maybe 500 years. But when you look at those codes, first of all, they're very harsh, but there's no kind of explanation about why you should do this. I think there's a lot of overt and implied logic to why some of these laws exist. I mean, the calf in the mother's milk is like, what is that about? It doesn't really say. But a lot of the other stuff is pretty logical. I always think about the one with the ox that gores people. And, the ox gets stoned regardless because it's just a bad ox. But, you can't, an unpredictable ox, a dangerous ox. But the fact that the man who owns the ox, if he knows this ox has done this before and still doesn't control it, then he is as much to blame as the ox. And we can draw analogies between current politics. If you know something is bad and you don't do anything about it, you're equally at fault. But I think there's an implied logic to it. And this is a means too about becoming better people. It's not arbitrary, most of it. It's like, this is how you become a better person. That's all.
I'm so appreciative, particularly that you brought in this whole image of the wedding, because of course that's one of the traditional ways that the moment at Mount Sinai is understood, is that this is a wedding ceremony. And you got me thinking about all the weddings that I've officiated at. And I'm standing in front of these 20-some-year-olds, and they are in the glorious moment of romance, and thinking how wonderful this is going to be. But of course, that moment of romance, as you point out, gets translated at some point into, okay, who's going to take out the garbage, and who's going to do the laundry, and all the details of what it means. And I thought, when people get married, basically it's because people don't want to be alone, and they want to be more than just oneself in the world. And when marriages go bad, it's oftentimes because one or more of the people in it, their sense of what it means to not be alone means I want to have someone around me that I can control, that I can impose myself on, and I'll be bigger that way. And not realizing that there's another one, which is what one can be bigger than oneself by surrendering oneself into a relationship, and that the relationship is what grows, and surrendering into the relationship makes one bigger than one could ever have imagined. So thank you so much for bringing all that wonderful imagery. Let me call upon Robert. He's got his hand raised.
Well, thank you again for another lovely evening. What struck my mind was the reality of man, the capacity of the human reality. Here we come from being pagans, right? Slaves. And now we have a priestly class that is guiding this community with 613 laws. And I think that says something about the human nature to learn, to grow, to develop, and to mature. The other thing that came to my mind is, it's very trivial, but Mark, the section you read mentioned 3 oxen, I believe. Mine, I use a King James version, and it just referred to more than one. And I'm wondering what the literal Hebrew is for that verse. I wish I could remember which one it was, but you specifically mentioned 3, where I think it's about the only time that my King James version has diverged clearly. Do you know what I'm referring to, Rabbi?
I'm not sure.
This section. Well, if you run across it, Mark, let me know. You read Hebrew and let me know. I'm curious. Yeah.
So let me see. Anyone else want to share? But what you got me to think about is this. I'm going back to our artist who said that when she paints, she paints. She begins without knowing. She begins without beginning. And one of the ways in which Kabbalah understands what the story of creation is all about is that it is an expression of divine desire for attachment. And that is why Aviva Zornberg, her book about Genesis, is called The Beginnings of Desire. She explores how this notion about this Bereshit is an expression of divine desire for relationship. And so that got me to thinking, putting that in the context of our artists, that and also in the context of what Rashi is and the Midrash is trying to get us to think about, is that holy beginnings are not based on knowledge. Holy beginnings are based on a desire. They're based on a desire for attachment. And so I think that is what this portion and this notion that Rashi kind of inserts to disrupt our logical, chronological reading. He disrupts that by saying, consider this. Consider that the beginning of what's transpiring here isn't based upon an acceptance now of what they know. It's based upon a desire to receive what's being received now and the desire to go further. In particular, to go further with a transformation of themselves. I say I've got Norm and Mark Thompson. So go ahead, Norm.
And so interesting that you brought creation into today's discussion. Last week when we were going over Parshat Yitro, there was some verbiage there that to me connected Yitro with creation. And I think what we see here is the creation of law and order, which was largely absent from the people. They're just out of Egypt for a few months now. And law and order didn't exist then. There was only the taskmaster's whip that existed. I'm playing also with on the one hand, Rashi says this verse came before that verse, and on the other hand, we say there's no beginning and no after in Torah. Well, maybe there is and maybe there isn't. I also am playing with the idea that the title to the picture, beginning without a beginning. We start with the woman who's there with her child, and the child is beginning. The woman isn't beginning. It just kind of rolls around in my head as a spring point for thought.
Lovely. And what you got me to think about, Norm, you used the word law and order. I get what you're saying, and what I would like to suggest to substitute for law and order is the word sovereignty. That there's the notion of sovereignty, of having a sense of full development of oneself, as when we call this, the phrase the sovereign self, the one who's aware of, knowing, and is able to execute all the skills, talents, and traits and characters that one has been blessed with. And in a sense, that's what this whole story is about, as a kind of, if you want to call it a metaphor, this journey that began in this infantile world that we call Eden, where all that requires is being taken care of. And we discover that an inhospitable environment for humanity.
And very difficult to make that personal development if you're about coveting.
Exactly. To the extent, in fact, it's the opposite. The more that you covet, the more you're getting away from the sovereign self. You might end up looking like someone who's in charge, but ultimately it's a flight from oneself. The bully is in flight from oneself. And that's ultimately what self-love and what idolatry is all about, the flight from self. So this notion about, I like what you're talking about in terms of law and order, trying to regain some sense of placement in the world and protection of that placement. And if we think about that in psychological and spiritual terms, it's about reaching one's sovereign self. One is no longer either a slave or an oppressor. Okay. Let me call
Yeah.
Mark Thompson.
Right. Robert, I just wanted to clarify something. I may have misspoke because I didn't get much sleep last night. So I just wanted to review that verse that I think you were referring to. And it's chapter 21, verse 36. And what I read, or what I thought I read, was, however, if the work bull was known to have gored on 3 previous occasions, yet its owner
That's
did
it.
not guard it. That is it. So there weren't 3 bulls, there were 3
Oh,
previous occasions.
No.
Thank you, Mark.
And literally in Hebrew, the translation I'm reading is from day before yesterday. If a bull is known to gore from day before yesterday, meaning in the past, he's a repeat
That's
offender.
interesting. You have a different, I happen to have the Chabad in front of me, so that's why there's a difference in the translation today. There's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is the discussion about the painting and the artist's intention not to know ahead of time what he or she is creating. You know, with writers, there's this constant competition between what they call plotters and writers that fly by the seat of their pants, or pantsers. So there's plotters and pantsers, and I thought just for fun, I would read a couple of quotes that you might find kind of entertaining. So if you bear with me, see if I can find them here. Okay, here is some example of plotters. J.K. Rowling. I have a very complicated plan that I have been working on for years. Um, John Irving. I always know the ending before I begin. That's where I start. Uh, James Patterson. I write detailed outlines for all my books. Now, for the pantsers, Stephen King says, I distrust plot for 2 reasons. First, because our lives are largely plotless. And second, because I believe plotting and the spontaneity of real creation aren't compatible. And Margaret Atwood, if I waited for perfection, I would never write a word. Ray Bradbury, you must stay drunk on writing to reality so reality cannot destroy you. And finally, Ernest Hemingway, write drunk, edit sober.
Very you're sharing all of that. Okay. I think David and Susan, you'd like to share? Yeah.
Did you have something, Susan? Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay, what I have is a request concerning the thou shalt not covet, which we're now calling you will not covet, and drawing in an implication that this is a word about how you will behave, a prediction rather than an instruction. It's a prediction. And then at the end of Aseret Hadibarot, which we just read, we're also saying something that's normally translated as thou shalt not. We're saying we're turning it into a prediction.
Promise.
And I would like to know more about the Hebrew word and Hebrew structure, Hebrew grammar and syntax, etc., that allows us to make this interpretation.
Right. Well, you know, even in English, if you were to say, you shall not covet, you could hear that as an instruction, or you can hear that as a prediction. I mean, it's just built into the future tense of the verb in any language, right? It's either you shall not, you know, or you won't, you know, you won't want to. So so the same thing in the Hebrew as well. Go ahead, David, or Susan, if you wanted anything further. You're muted though. Yeah.
I did.
I was sitting off camera and not following in the book, but I was listening. And when it was read, wait here for us until we return to you. I went, isn't that what he said at the Akedah? And that's such a foundational portion of who we are. And so then I looked at this in the same way.
Oh, that's lovely.
Maybe that's what Rashi meant by it was said before.
Maybe. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. I've got Richard right here, and then I'll get to you, Robert, again.
This you shall not covet. There's all these rules, all these words, all these commandments, all these suggestions. And there's a saying, the impious rely on their gods, the righteous are the support of the Lord. And my idea here is that each of these words, each of these rules has a context and has a principle behind it, maybe an ineffable principle. And the notion here is start internalizing this, make this part of your thinking and your behavior, and you will find out that you won't have any covet of anything else because you'll feel complete and authentic and sovereign within yourself. It's about internalizing the principles behind these worlds. That's what immersing oneself in Torah means. When you take a breath, the world is being renewed daily by God. Daily, the world to come is being made constantly. His breath is ever in the air. And so that's what we're in breathing. And we can bring that spirit out of ourselves, within ourselves. And when we take the time to consider it and behave with it and internalize it, there's nothing else to cover for because you got it all. That's my way of looking at it.
Thank you. And Robert, would you like to follow up a little bit?
Yeah, I have to say something about artists. All of these artists have a thought about what art is and how to do it. Every artist, every human being is unique. There aren't two people who are alike. The dance between plotting and freedom and planning and flowing, it's different for every single one. And, writing poetry, every poem is different. Sometimes I know what the end is. Sometimes it's just the sound of words that I love and I want to romance them and dance them till they lead somewhere. Every artist, with every brushstroke or pen stroke, as long as they're authentic to themselves, I think that's the issue. Versus, art this or art that. And I just want to say, I know at least one soul on this screen is a physician. And please God, plot. Do plot. Any dentists, please plot. Architects, please plot. And then fly. That's all. That's it.
Nice, Robert.
So I'm fond of saying you don't want to hire an engineer that's an optimist.
So let me cohere this moment of ours together just a little bit. I'm quite struck with our artist, Tracy Everly, and her notion that she begins without knowing. What she begins with is a desire to explore. And I want to, it evokes for me what the mystical tradition within Judaism says that creation is all about. That the moment of creation is an expression by the divine, I want to be with you. Do you want to be with me? And this moment that we're reading about right now is an answer that comes from within the human being that basically says, yes, I want to be with you. And all of that precedes knowing exactly what's entailed. And that's also what a successful marriage is going to be about. I want to be with you. I don't know if in 40 years we're going to be living in Pocatello. I don't know if we're going to be rich or poor. I want to be with you. We'll work out the details along the way. But because I'm with you, I'm more than I was before. And I have everything that I need because I'm with you. That's what I think this is all about. God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well. Thank you.
God bless everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Not all. Thank you.
Thank you. Very beautiful. Thank you. I thought